Welcome to another edition of Wellness Webinars, a series of 14 timely presentations on coping with quarantine and COVID-19, brought to you by Carolina Behavioral Health Alliance and Mood Treatment Center. Today's presenter is Virginia Love, licensed clinical social worker, and Allie Turner, a licensed professional counselor. Today's topic, support the front lines, healthcare workers in dangerous times. Ladies, the floor is yours.
All right, good afternoon. My name is Virginia Love. I am here to present to you today some hopefully helpful information that's going to help you. And first of all, I just want to say thank you for doing what you do. Thank you for serving on our front lines and being such a strength and a resource right now as we go through this COVID-19 pandemic. We hope this information will be helpful to you, and we are glad that you're here. I'm having some technical difficulties here. Okay. So just starting off here with a quote, "Within you is the absolute power to rise above any situation or struggle and transform it into the strongest and most beautiful version of you." So our part one objectives, the part that I will be presenting today, we're going to work to understand state-dependent brain functioning, to enhance self-awareness and coping. And we're also going to work to apply cognitive behavioral therapy approaches to further cope with negative thoughts and emotions in constructive ways. And given COVID-19 and the pandemic and the unknowns, we are experiencing unpredictable stressors. Typically, we function as regulated and cope with stressors in the best way possible. However, with COVID-19 and its far-reaching impact in our lives, we are noticing various levels of dysregulation. We can expect more fatigue, expect everyone to be less capable of focusing, and we can expect more irritability from ourselves and others. During this time, we are vulnerable to high levels of cortisol, trouble with our immunity, inflammation, and aging at an increased rate. I know that's one that I didn't really want to hear about, but we can do some things to help prevent it. And I want to take a moment too just to talk about my own experience. Early in this COVID-19 situation, especially when we started noticing more people around the globe getting sick and it's starting to come into the United States, I woke up one morning to hear my son coughing, and immediately I had a reaction. I had a thought that, oh my gosh, he's sick, he's got COVID-19. And I didn't cope with that in the very best way. I remember being frantic, running to get a mask, running to get wipes, and wanting to quarantine him in his room. And it just was not a very rational reaction. But I do feel if I had taken time to use some basic skills to calm myself, I would have handled that a lot better. So with that being said, it is so important that we try to be gentle with ourselves and others. And the importance of self-awareness is knowing if I am regulated or dysregulated. And without creating a space for our awareness of our dysregulation and understanding regulation skills, we will remain sensitized and vulnerable. And if we remain in heightened states where we are sensitized, it's going to have more wear and tear on ourselves. So the better that we can find some relief from that and to not be in this heightened state all the time, the better off we will be. So here's where I do want to talk about state-dependent brain functioning. I found this very helpful in understanding the benefits more to calming ourselves in simple ways, because we can't always think our way out of situations. When we are under a state of threat, we feel dysregulated. Feeling threatened changes the way we think, feel, and behave. And state-dependent brain functioning in the neocortex, while we are dysregulated, drops from 85% to 10%. And at the bottom, the brainstem down here, it shifts from 10% of functioning to 60% of functioning. And that's where we're in that flock or freeze. You know, we know something is going on. We're not sure what to do. So we may be in that flock or freeze mode. But next, in a state of high dysregulation, we notice that the state-dependent brain functioning in the neocortex, while highly dysregulated, drops from 60% to 5%. And the bottom brainstem down here again shifts from 60% to 85%. And that is when we are in that flight or fight mode. And so I want to take a moment just to reiterate, you know, up here where we can think clearly and rationally, just again to say and to show you on this diagram how that drops. You know, when we're dysregulated, that neocortex functioning drops from 85% to 10%. So you might notice that when you're in a state of threat or you quickly react to situations, sometimes you react in ways that you wouldn't normally behave, and later on you might feel bad about it, or you might say, hey, you know what, I could have done that differently. So so when we notice our dysregulation, what are we to do? So here we can understand and incorporate self-regulation while practicing that bottoms-up approach to regulation. What we need to do is to tap into somatosensory regulation with breathing, as well as pattern and rhythmic movement. And bottom-up techniques work through the body to change the brain, especially the lower subcortical areas of the brain outside of the conscious awareness and conscious control. So here's where we've come to a part in my presentation where I do want to take time for us to practice breathing together. I can't emphasize how important it is. And COVID-19 and going through this has actually helped me to be more aware of my own breath and breathing and taking time out to breathe. So I wanted to share this with you because I think sometimes we all know this, but we can get away from doing some of the most simplest things that can help us. So what I would like to do is I'm going to demonstrate some of the breathing, and then I'm going to set up the breathing practice for us, including with some light music here. And then once we start to get more into the practice of the breathing, I do plan to cover my camera. So just be aware of that. But when we're done with the breathing exercise, I will uncover my camera. So to go ahead and start, I just want to use this visual here. And just imagine this as being your lungs, you know, moving in and out of your rib cage. So just take a moment and just go ahead and let all that air release from your lungs. And even if you want to, place your hands around your rib cage down here and feel all that air going out. And then just breathe in and out. And breathe in and out. So please just continue breathing, and we're going to walk through a breathing exercise together. And I am going to go ahead and cover my camera and play some music, but please just listen to hear my voice, and when we were done, I will take the cover off of my camera. So hopefully you can hear the calm music. And this is a wonderful practice to do between patients, appointments, when you can sit down for a few minutes, or walking from one place to another, when you get home from work to unwind, in the evening before bed, or when you notice that you feel stressed. I often suggest to clients to practice a short 1 to 2 minute version of this before big work meetings, going on camera, challenging conversations, or anytime they notice dysregulation in themselves. So go ahead and get comfortable in your seat. If you would like, you could even lie down. And just go ahead and shake off any tension. Shake it off those arms and just shake it out. Next, breathe in and out through the nose for a few cycles to settle in. Now breathe in for 7 counts and out for 7 counts. In for 7 and out for 7. Next, bring your attention to your exhale and work to extend your exhale, building to 11 counts out. Naturally breathe in for 7 and out for 11 while noticing the breath moving in and out. And let's just sit here and practice this together and just listen to the music. In for 7, out for 11. And lastly, slowly open your eyes and come back to the room. And bring your awareness to your body and notice how you feel after this practice. Very good. All right, so I hope everyone enjoyed that, and my hope is that you'll continue to practice it. And as I like to tell people, practice it when you need it and when you don't need it. And the more we do it, just like practicing a sport or trying to get better at our running, the better we will be at it. So moving on to the second part of my presentation, we're going to go ahead now and take a look at a top-down approach and awareness to using CBT. So after we become self-aware and tap into skills to regulate, our cognitive functioning improves, allowing us to cope in better ways and to have more appropriate and rational thoughts. And the approach that we're going to look at today is around cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, as some of you may have heard. And cognitive behavioral therapy is based on the cognitive model. The way we perceive situations influences how we feel emotionally. So it is not the situation that directly affects how people feel emotionally, but rather their thoughts in that situation. When people are in distress, their perspective is often inaccurate, and their thoughts may be unrealistic. Cognitive behavioral therapy helps us identify distressing thoughts and evaluate how realistic the thoughts are. When we learn to change our distorted thinking, then we learn to change our distorted thinking. When we think more realistically or rationally, we feel better. The emphasis is also consistently on solving problems and initiating behavioral changes. So here is a visual aid I created to help us take a look at cognitive behavioral therapy. But cognitive behavioral therapy was a model looking at how we process thoughts created by Aaron Beck. And there's really good information at the Beck Institute. But here we see that situations happen. Situations happen all day long. And then we have thoughts about those situations. We can have positive thoughts about it. We can have irrational thoughts about it. And those thoughts influence our reactions. And our reactions are with our behaviors. We behave in a certain way. We have reactions that are emotional. We may feel happy. We may feel sad. We may feel angry. But also, back to what we were talking about earlier, we have a physiological reaction to the situations that are going on. So given the situation of COVID-19 and the situations that are happening as a result of COVID-19, we are noticing some of these thoughts here that I have placed on the screen. In blue, there are some thoughts that may be around feelings of sadness, hopelessness, or depression. In red, some feelings around anger, injustice. And over in the top right corner in orange, these are feelings of uncertainty, anxiety, maybe things that are out of our control. And I want to take a minute again to share just an example of myself, given this COVID-19 situation and how I have become more aware of my thoughts for better coping. So the situation for me based on COVID-19 was in my practice here at the Mood Treatment Center and becoming worried about contracting COVID-19 due to working in close proximity of our patients. I know it's not near as close as some of you who are on the front lines, but yet still that fear was very real to me. And in that, I decided to take some action with support of my office. I was able to decide to work from home, and that felt like a pretty good way of handling that, so that worked out very well for me. So I had the situation of feeling, I could catch the illness or get sick. But I was able to think that through and think of all of my options. And I chose the option of deciding to work from home. And that brought a lot of comfort and feeling like I had some control. However, once I started working from home, I started having technical difficulties, but also too, I felt very restricted in being able to do some of the types of therapies that I do. One of the therapies I do, it is very important that I'm in the room with the person, that we have attunement going on. And I have not been able to do this given using teletherapy to provide my service. So I noticed immediately, the thoughts of I can't do my job like I'd like to, I can't help people, I'm not going to be able to help people. And I noticed, in my reactions based on those thoughts, behaviorally, I felt like I was less focused. I wasn't as motivated to do my job because I felt hopeless. I felt inadequate at times. My emotions were not very pleasant at all. I felt some sadness. I felt, sometimes anger and frustration, but also physiologically, I noticed I was having a few more headaches. I was feeling drained and tired, and overall, it just wasn't a good feeling. However, what I was able to do was to change that thought in regards to that situation of providing services through teletherapy, and changing that thought greatly helped me. And what we're going to move on to next is just some techniques to help us change those thoughts when we notice that the thoughts are irrational or they're not very positive. So here we have the acronym ITCH to help us problem solve when situations are coming up and we don't know quite how to handle it. But I want to reiterate again that this is going to work best for us after we have calmed ourselves, doing some regulation exercises to regulate us, like the deep breathing. So ITCH stands for I, identifying the problem. T, think about the possible solutions. C, choose a solution to implement. And H, how well does it work? And maybe I have to go back and evaluate it again. But this gets us to thinking about how best to solve the problem versus seeming trapped and hopeless. Another one that I like is Socratic questions for guided discovery. And here I'd like for you to think about maybe some of your own thoughts that have come up in regards to COVID-19. It could be similar to some of those that I showed on the slide earlier. I can't do my job. This isn't fair. What if someone I love gets sick or dies? So I want you to hold that thought, but also apply it to these questions as I go through them and see how it shifts your thinking, or how it shifts that thought to maybe more rational. So what is the evidence that my thought is true? What is the evidence that my thought is not true? What is an alternative explanation or viewpoint? What's the worst thing that could happen, and how would I cope if it did? What is the best thing that could happen? And what is the most likely outcome? What is the effect of telling myself this thought? What could be the effect of changing my thinking? What would I tell someone else if he or she viewed the situation this way? What should I do? And I want to point out the one where it says, what's the worst thing that could happen, and how would I cope if it did? Some of those questions about if someone gets sick and they die, what would I do? The worst part of the worst thing happening is to not have a plan. So a lot of times us thinking about that can help us to feel some even small level of power and control, of thinking about, okay, what if the worst thing could happen? How would I cope with it? It may help the worst thing not be so bad. And here we've come to a part where we're going to wrap up my presentation, but looking at CBT for empowerment and control. So if we take situations, and even given COVID-19, and we can pay more attention to the types of thoughts that we're having in regards to the situations that we're experiencing, we can actually experience some positive things out of this and get a sense of feeling more control and actually being able to control things in our lives that may seem out of our control. So here are just some thoughts that we have noticed and people have shared with me. I will do my best regardless. I am stronger than I thought. I have a caring community. I am noticing what is most important. I am learning what it feels like for others to be fearful and scared. This is teaching me to take better care of my mind and my body. I'm not spending money on things I don't need. And lastly, I am not alone in this. So with that, I just want to say thank you. I hope there have been parts of this that are beneficial to you. And now I believe we are going to switch over to taking some questions. And I'm going to see if we have any questions here.
And I'm going to join right now too to help answer questions. And I'll just briefly introduce myself. My name is Allie Turner, and I'm a licensed clinical mental health counselor. And I work with Virginia here in Winston-Salem.
All right, thank you, Allie.
Yeah.
So I have two questions here. One question is, I have never heard of a bottoms-up practice. Can you elaborate? Yes, I can. So Dr. Bruce Perry, I think it's the Neuroscience Institute. There will be a citation at the end of the slide. The way he explained this really spoke to me as far as that bottoms up approach. The bottom being the bottom part of the brain, the bottom brainstem, you know, where our breathing is regulated, our heart rate and things like that. And just the importance of regulating that first, as that's the part of our brain that is most activated when we feel under some state of threat. So that bottoms up approach is kind of getting back to the basics at the bottom of the brain to help us regulate. And so I hope that was helpful. If not, please do check out the information that Dr. Bruce Perry has generated as part of his research. Okay, and let's see here. And another question, do you pause at the top or the end of the in and out breath? Let's see, so when we're breathing in for 7, we can pause in the middle, and then also too at the end of the breath you can pause. And as you work to get better at this, you'll just notice that you can feel, as you practice more, you'll feel more regulated. And here it says, you know, some notes I had for myself, as you practice extending your exhale, you might naturally increase the length. And this is a sign that your nervous system is regulating. So I hope that question, that answer helps. And yes, the PowerPoint will be available, I do believe.
Yeah, we're going to post the slides at www.moodtreatmentcenter.com and then /webinars. It'll be on there tomorrow.
Okay, very good. So someone had the question about the itch points, and that will be on the PowerPoint. So you'll be able to go back and view that. And I'll take one more question here. And it's a great question on the breathing. I hear different things about breathing through the mouth and the nose. Doesn't matter. I think you can see what your personal preference is. I myself found it just more calming or soothing to breathe in and out through the nose. Some people may find that harder to do at first, but perhaps you could maybe build toward that. And Allie might have some more information on that question for us.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
I'm just going to say thank you to everyone, and I'm going to turn it over to Allie.
Okay, thanks, Virginia. So as far as breathing through the nose or the mouth, what I found is that some people prefer to exhale through the nose because it can kind of lengthen and draw out your exhale, which is kind of what we're looking for with diaphragmatic breathing practice. That if you imagine when you're really, really anxious, you generally breathe from sort of the top of your chest, and it might be really rapid breath versus this other kind of breathing that we're working to train ourselves on. And that's the way that we normally breathe when we're at rest. If you're in deep sleep, you're generally breathing diaphragmatically, and it's pretty slow. So as far as breathing out through the nose or in through the nose, sometimes people prefer that just because it can kind of taper your breath and make it a slower and longer breath. But it's a personal preference. Either way is really effective. So I'm going to move into sharing some slides. I'll open up. Okay. So first we wanted to talk about, this is fairly obvious probably to most of you, but healthcare workers are facing particularly high levels of stressors during this time, in a job that's generally pretty stressful all the time. So some of those added stressors that you may already know about are concerns about access to or availability of personal protective equipment. That's been an issue in some states, in some areas. In addition, just a real feeling of uncertainty. All of us are kind of in this place where we don't know exactly what's going to come. We don't know how to prepare other than just the basic information that we've gotten. But a lot of healthcare professionals have had sort of an added sense of uncertainty where they're trying to promote a sense of calm in patients without having all the information that might kind of help them to feel a little bit better. So there's added stressors there for sure. Also, I think a lot of healthcare professionals who interact with patients one-on-one have had concerns about their family or their friends and worrying about, will I expose anyone to anything, regardless of having worn protective equipment. So those are just some of the added stressors to an already very stressful job. So given those added stressors, I think it's really important that we touch on the fact that caregivers need care too. A lot of times, unfortunately, we can have this stigma as healthcare professionals, whether you're working in a medical field or a mental health field, that we're supposed to be okay all the time, kind of this superhuman phenomena that I think is really unfair and can lead us to avoid getting help for ourselves, which can really influence the treatment that we can give to our patients and clients. So it's kind of this trickle-down approach that if we get the care we need and the support we need, we're better able to care for and support others. So we really think we need to challenge this stigma right now, the stigma that we're supposed to be okay, because we're not always okay, and that's okay. Mental health care is there and it's accessible if you need it. So we're going to talk a little bit going forward about what kind of conditions are healthcare professionals more susceptible to during this time of added stress? How do you know if you maybe need to reach out and get more support? And what does that look like? So healthcare workers are more susceptible during this crisis to the following conditions: anxiety disorders, depression, and post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. And in the following slides, I'm going to go into further depth about what these disorders look like, what's the difference between kind of a healthy level of stress, a healthy level of anxiety, what's proportionate or reasonable sadness versus what are these disorders and when do I need more support. So anxiety, I think, gets a bad rap. A normal level of anxiety is really healthy for us, and we all experience anxiety to some degree. Having anxiety does not mean you have an anxiety disorder. Anxiety, when it's at its best, is really there to help us motivate and prepare and react to stressful situations or even just really important situations in a way that's effective. So anxiety can be our friend. You know, imagine if I had had no anxiety about this presentation today, I might be in pajamas on my couch and feel really unprepared. So thank you, anxiety. However, anxiety can get to a point where it really starts to interfere with our lives. And this is where we're looking more towards an anxiety disorder rather than a healthy or normal level of anxiety. When we have disordered anxiety, we might experience a range of physical symptoms that can be really debilitating. It can also really impact our sleep, sleep being really important for mood. It can cause ruminative or intrusive thoughts that are really worrisome, and it can make us really irritable as well. So if you're experiencing a heightened degree of that, to the point that it's interfering with day-to-day functioning, you may be looking at a disordered level of anxiety, and there is help for that. Next, we'll talk a little bit about depression. And here again, depression or being depressed is something that we commonly use in the vernacular, that I felt depressed after I lost my job. I felt depressed when, a family member or loved one died. So sadness, grief, and kind of that adjustment when something really difficult or painful or really especially important life transition occurs, that's completely normal. And it is still something that may require support. When we talk about depression, though, we're talking about something that's really persistent and it's debilitating. So it might be that I don't feel sad after someone passed away. It might be that I felt sad and I kept being sad for months or years. And depression can kind of be characterized by the following symptoms, which I think will help distinguish it from what we might call day-to-day or sort of average sadness or grief. So some of the symptoms that are specific to depression include these feelings of sadness, hopelessness, tearfulness, or emptiness that sustain over a long period of time. Significant shifts in appetite. And I think in general, when we talk about depression, a lot of people think about, I'm not hungry at all. I have no desire to eat. And that is true for some people with depression. Other people with depression might find that they're overeating in a way that feels really not normal for them. So it can kind of shift either way. The point is that there's a really marked shift. Difficulties with sleep with depression. So again, I think a lot of people will think about, oh, I oversleep or I stay in bed all day, and that can be part of depression. But also depression can make people feel like they're experiencing insomnia, where it's really difficult to get to sleep or to stay asleep throughout the night and feel rested. So either way, kind of those other ends of the spectrum, you might be looking at depression. It also really impairs our concentration and focus. So it makes it harder to kind of work through problem solving or to prepare or to just function. Also, there's slowed thinking and processing along with that. A hallmark of depression can be these kind of persistent feelings or thoughts about, I feel worthless, I have no value, or this intense feeling of guilt that's really disproportionate to any kind of event or behavior that we've done. It feels like we don't know its origin, and it feels really overwhelming. Additionally, there will be a loss of interest in activities that you generally found to be pleasurable or enjoyed, like hobbies, things like eating, sex, and your job even, or relationships can feel not so interesting anymore. Anxiety and restlessness and agitation can also go along with depression. So it's interesting we want to try to tease apart, am I having an anxiety disorder or anxiety, or am I having depression, which could include anxiety? Additionally, people who are depressed feel tired a lot of the time, and sometimes they may even feel like they have really heavy or weighed down limbs. That's a symptom of atypical depression, which is treated just the same way as regular depression. Also, recurrent thoughts about death. Sometimes people will have dreams about death, or just find themselves having intrusive thoughts about death during the day, or thinking about and planning suicide. So those are the differences between clinical depression and your average sadness or grief over a transition. So next, I want to talk a little bit about PTSD. Stress is normal. We all experience stress, especially right now. So what's the difference between stress and PTSD? Again, what's a common factor here is that this is persistent and it interferes with your life. So stress is something that we all experience when we're having, particularly difficult or abnormal or just heightened emotional response to something that we don't feel super prepared for or is just triggering for us. And it's a normal reaction to that. And most people who have experienced traumatic events will maybe have symptoms for a little while where they might feel more heightened, anxious, more trouble sleeping or regulating. But what the difference is that most people who experience a traumatic event with self-care and with time will improve and get better. The difference is with PTSD, instead of improving, you start to feel worse. And it doesn't last for just a month, it might last for many months or even years. So that's when we might know that we're looking at PTSD. If it's really interfering with our functioning, if it feels like it's way beyond the point that we should have probably recovered on our own. And so I want to talk a little bit about the symptoms of PTSD, just so you can help to check in with yourself and see if any of these remind you of your experience, in which case it's a really good idea to seek treatment, because we can treat PTSD really effectively, just as we can treat depression and anxiety very effectively. So behavioral symptoms of PTSD include agitation, irritability, hypervigilance. Hypervigilance is this experience of being highly sensitive and on guard. It kind of is described easily by, if you think about if someone came around a corner behind you, if you would be spooked and like throw your hands up or completely overreact, that might be a hypervigilant state of being. It also can involve having trouble with people being around you or peripheral to you, because your senses are so heightened that you're really distracted by any kind of perceived threat in your environment. And hypervigilance is really a really disabling kind of state of being. Also, behaviorally, people with PTSD will experience self-destructive behavior. They might be taking risks that they would not normally, or acting out in ways that are really harmful to them in the long term, and it's just not normal for them to be behaving that way. Also, social isolation really affects people with PTSD. Sometimes that can have to do with a feeling of mistrust of others that can come from PTSD, or just a general feeling that we're not supposed to be around others because of negative beliefs that we might start to have about ourselves. Psychologically, PTSD affects us with flashbacks. Flashbacks are an experience of re-experiencing. In other words, not only are you aware of the trauma in a mental way or a cognitive way, that maybe you can see the event again in your mind, but somatically, it feels as though you are re-experiencing it. It is happening again to you. Really debilitating as well. Intense fear, severe anxiety, again, mistrust of others. And then as far as mood symptoms, we can experience a loss of interest or pleasure in activities, kind of like we talked about with depression, guilt or loneliness, mood swings, and emotional detachment, having a hard time relating to other people in a way that we normally would not experience, even people who are really close to us. And finally, it can interfere with sleep. You can have insomnia or nightmares that are really disruptive and leave you feeling really not rested. Okay, so that's the difference between PTSD and stress. And I'm sorry, I have allergies. That's why I keep clearing my throat. So let's talk about when to get help. Again, we can have levels of anxiety. We can have an experience of feeling sad or feeling guilty or sometimes overwhelmed, or we can feel really stressed and still be able to cope with it using our support systems, using self-care strategies that we know. And that's normal, right? Because right now we are not in our normal. Things feel very abnormal right now. So it makes sense to experience a different sort of more reactive or more emotional state. However, if the supports you already have and the self-care you already know about doesn't feel like enough, you don't have to suffer, and you don't have to be on your own. There are lots of resources out there that are free right now, including mindfulness resources and skills resources, but also there's mental health care available. We at New Treatment Center are taking new patients right now, and we are open to doing teletherapy, telemed. So that's one option. And so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about mindfulness, and then I'm going to lead you in a guided mindfulness practice. So some of you may have heard of mindfulness. It's pretty popular. It's a term that's used a lot. Mindfulness is something that we can all do. It requires only our body and our mind, and sometimes a little bit of patience. And mindfulness involves being really fully present in the moment right now and observing yourself or attuning to yourself free from judgment. And that's the piece that I think is really important that we often struggle with, that I might notice that my stomach hurts, or I might notice that my breathing is shallow. And then I might follow that with a thought of, oh, I should be doing better, or I should feel something else. Mindfulness asks that we, instead of having that judgmental thought, really just be with the experience without trying to categorize it in a way that makes us feel negatively towards ourselves. So mindfulness is this sort of umbrella term for attuning to and observing our sensations in our body, our thoughts, our emotional experience, and any kind of mixture of those all together. It's evidence-based for treating anxiety and depression. It's also really helpful for people with PTSD and all kinds of other, it's helpful in general. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the benefits of mindfulness practice. Mindfulness practice has been studied, and there's evidence backing it for stress reduction, decrease in rumination. Rumination is those sticky thoughts, or those thoughts that seem to go on a loop, and they really aren't very helpful. They kind of get in our way. Improved focus, cognitive flexibility, relationship satisfaction, and that one's interesting. Mindfulness practice has been shown to improve our empathy, which also helps us to connect to other people as well as ourselves. Greater working memory has been proven, as well as decreased emotional reactivity. And it helps us to regulate our nervous system and to not reach a place of hyperarousal. And so I wanted to talk to you briefly about, for some of you, it may be the first time that you've done guided mindfulness practice. So I want to talk about things to keep in mind when practicing mindfulness as a beginner. First, this is not about perfection. It is not about getting it right. And it's not about any kind of destination or particular conclusion. Mindfulness is more about the experience and the process rather than where we're trying to go or get to, which can feel uncomfortable because generally that's the way we try to think about or plan for the world. So I want to say that it's completely natural to experience distraction, to lose focus, to feel confused or frustrated when you're beginning to practice mindfulness. You can have negative thoughts about yourself come up, like, oh, I'm not getting this right. Oh, this doesn't really work. What is this? This is bogus. Any of that can come up, and probably will. And so the task is to sort of gently notice that thought or that feeling of frustration or agitation, and see if you can let it pass and bring yourself back to what you're doing, to your mindfulness practice, without judging yourself. There again, that's the key. We're trying to be free from judgment. So I am going to play a little bit of music, and I'm going to turn my camera off just like Virginia did, because I don't want to distract you while you're practicing. And I'm going to lead you through a mindfulness practice. This is one of the most popular, common mindfulness practices. It's called Leaves on a Stream. And so before I turn the camera off, I want to just give you this little intro. Mindfulness skills help to focus our attention, especially when we are overwhelmed with strong emotions. This skill can help us stay calm and rational, allowing us to choose how we want to respond rather than automatically and impulsively reacting to situations. We want any thoughts, for example, I blame myself, any feelings, for example, I feel angry, and any urges, for example, I want to hurt myself or I want to stop, and physical sensations, I feel sick, I feel pain in my back. We want them, as they come up during the activity, to float away, and we're going to use our minds to do that, to sort of create this psychological distance between the experience that we have deemed negative and ourselves and our ability to react to it. So now I'm going to turn off my camera. I'll turn it right back on after we do our practice, and I'm going to play a little bit of music in the background too. So hopefully you can hear that music and hear me over it. So to begin, start by sitting upright in your chair, putting your hands comfortably on your lap. If you want to, close your eyes. Remember that your task is to simply observe any thoughts, feelings, sensations, or urges that you may experience in your body. I want you to imagine that you are standing on a bridge above a stream. Floating on the stream are leaves from the surrounding trees. This may be a stream that you have actually been to before, or one that you have near your house, or it may be one that you just imagine. Take a few moments now to observe what is going on around you and what is happening within you. Remember, observing is just looking around. It is not attempting to label, describe, or respond in any way. Now, I want you to label what you observe without letting judgments get in your way. For each observation that you make, I want you to label it as a thought, feeling, urge, or physical sensation. Put it on one of the leaves and let it float off down the stream. So you may have a thought about something, then label it as a thought, put it on a leaf, and watch it float away downstream. Other things you might observe are body sensations, feelings you are experiencing, or distractions going on around you in the room. Label each one, put it on a leaf, and let it drift down the stream. The important thing to remember is not to go down the stream with the leaf, but rather to stand back and let the leaf drift off. If you notice your mind wandering off, gently notice where your mind was, what you were thinking about. Describe this distraction, then put it on a leaf and watch it float away downstream. Now slowly bring your focus back to the room. Feel yourself sitting on your chair. Listen to any sounds in the room. And slowly, and in your own time, begin to open your eyes. going to turn my camera back on. Okay, so that was Leaves on a Stream. And it's one of many mindfulness practices that you can add to your repertoire if you want to. There's a few good apps that are on the App Store that you could get to practice guided mindfulness. One is called Calm, and another is called Headspace. And you can download those for free and practice to your heart's content. And I hope that it helps to ease some of your anxiety, help you feel a little bit more distance from any thoughts or feelings that are getting in your way or just aren't serving you, and help you connect back to your own experience. It's free. It's something you can do wherever you are. All you need is your body and mind. And next, we'll leave you with a mantra here. This is the Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I feel like this is such appropriate mantra right now because there's so much out of our control, and acceptance is really on our side if we can learn to accept what is within our control and stay in that place. And mindfulness helps with that too, I think. So I think that Virginia had something more that she wanted to share actually at the end.
Allie, I am here. If you wanted to take a question first, we could do that.
Okay.
I'll just, the question is, what are some techniques to help refocusing on the stream? I keep getting pulled away in my thoughts.
Yeah, definitely. So I think, before we started the practice, I mentioned that will happen. That is a supernatural part of, not supernatural, but a supernatural part of practicing mindfulness. The point there is to just try to gently become aware that you left the stream or that you got lost or distracted, and just try to bring yourself back to it. So you can recreate the image in your mind if you need to, or you could even try putting "I got distracted" on a leaf and letting that float away from you, because we will get distracted. Our minds do this, and we just want to try not to judge ourselves or struggle with ourselves and be gentle in bringing ourselves back. I hope that helps. Were there any other questions?
Not that I can see right now.
Okay.
Okay. So just as we begin to wrap up, and I was thinking about what I had shared with you guys in the first part, I felt like I left out an important part here, as I am a little nervous. But I just wanted to go back and share, here on this slide, oops, bear with me. Talking about CBT and using this model to pay attention to our thoughts and work through things. I wanted to go back to that situation I talked about that I had noticed as far as with the work that I was doing and feeling like I couldn't do my job very well. So the situation was COVID-19, but then having to deal with some of those changes of deciding to work from home to feel, some control about not getting sick. So, but the situation was feeling like I couldn't do the job, that I wasn't going to be able to help people as much. So I noticed that thought. And what I did was I noticed that, I took time to breathe and to calm down. But I also noticed that, I was having a very irrational thought, because just me reaching out to people and being available to people is helpful during this time. And two, just being human and working with my patients to know that they're not alone in this and that I have my own fears and worries. I really settled on that and said, you know what, I'm human and I'm going to do the best that I can. And that really brought comfort to me, and that really helped my reaction, because here you see values. I value helping people and doing the best that I can. And I just had to stop and say, well, rationally, I'm going to do the best that I can. I've never done this type of therapy before. And soon my behaviors did change for the more positive. I was actually calmer. I wasn't feeling as stressed out. Physiologically, I was feeling more at ease with my body and my heart rate and what was going on. And emotionally, I felt more confident. I felt like, hey, I can handle this. I can get through it. But I really did have to pay attention to that thought that I had based on that situation given COVID-19. So I hope that helps for clarity, to see how the itch method or the Socratic questioning can help us work through these and to help us to find more rational thoughts based on the situations that we're experiencing.
And Virginia, it looks like we have another question. It's in the breathing exercise earlier. How many repetitions do you recommend during a setting? And I have a thought about that. I don't know if you do too.
Yeah, go ahead.
Generally, what I recommend to people is not so much about counting your repetitions. It's more about the length of time that you practice or the difference that you feel in your regulation. So for some, generally the rule of thumb is we usually say about 5 minutes is what it takes to start feeling the difference and feeling regulated. Sometimes 3 minutes can do that, but I would say go until you feel better, and you'll know when you feel better.
Yes, very good. And too, a lot of times I'll just, again, pay attention to any kind of shift that you notice. 5 minutes when you're starting this out is going to seem like a long time, but slowly building up to that. And even those of you who meditate, even just try this beforehand. I call it the 7-11 breathing, the one that we did together earlier. 7 in, pause, 11 out, pause. But yes, it does help to build up to it. But even research has shown, and this was part of Dr. Bruce Perry's information, that even 90 seconds of calming that bottom of the brain can really help us think more clearly and to help regulate more, to get that neocortex back in a good place for thinking and functioning.
Were there any other questions?
Doesn't look like it.
I don't think so. Okay, well, I hope this helped, and we really appreciate the opportunity to share with you guys. And thanks for taking the time to be with us today.
And thanks again for everything you do. And we wish everyone the best.
Yeah, stay safe.
Bye.